A Dark Night in Ba Sing Se. Case 1. A Dark Night at the University. By MuffinLance. Read by My Lost and Found. Chapter 2. Zuko chases some tail. Ba Sing Se University was bigger than the Caldera Military Academy. Which was weird, because shouldn't the country with the biggest universities be winning? Why were they spreading the light of civilization to a place whose library could have swallowed the whole royal archives in one double-doored bite? They were greeted outside the anthropology building by the assistant department head, a woman, and a baby. The baby was clutching a key in its fat baby fist. This was not the building key. "I am so sorry," the assistant head said. "The janitor was supposed to meet us here." "Oh, that's what you're sorry for?" said the woman, who had the air of someone who'd come over in a great hurry to not be late, only for it not to matter. "Zee," said the sleepy baby on her shoulder, who had the air of one who'd gone from babysitter to hurried mother without ever touching their crib. It moved the key towards its mouth. The woman pushed it away, without even looking. "It's no trouble," said Ryo-Cho-Jio. He'd put Zuko between himself and the baby, like a superior officer in an ambush. Like a common soldier, Zuko shifted just enough to let the woman's glare past. "I filed that missing report last week," she said, correctly identifying which of them held seniority. "I'm sorry, ma'am," said Ryo-Cho-Jio. "I don't want your excuses," she said. "I want—" "You the folks that wanted in?" asked an old man with a push broom, squinting at them in the light of the campus's weird green lamps. "Old Sweepy doesn't recognize any of you." The professor dug for his university identification papers. Ryo-Cho-Jio dug for his guard papers. Zuko dug for his junior guard papers, because peer pressure. The woman continued to hold a baby, who continued to hold a key. These credentials appeared to be sufficient for old Sweepy. "We all want this resolved," said the professor, as the janitor tried his own key in the building's lock. And then another. And another. "If you'd like to just leave that with me, you can get your daughter back to bed." "You had a key," the woman said. "You lost it." "Yeah," said the baby. It had been drifting off. It took this opportunity to wave its fist again. "Not that one," said old Sweepy, as he went through each of his keys in order, regardless of size. "It was stolen," the assistant head said. "Taken, misplaced, as seems to be happening to his effects, which is why we called these fine officers here." The woman seemed to freeze, like a viper cat before the strike. She turned, very slowly, back to Zuko and the rookie. "You're here about the break-ins. I don't care about his papers. I care about where he is. And every day you refuse to acknowledge that there's a case." "Not that one either," said old Sweepy. "We are from a different precinct," interrupted Zuko. "How long has your husband? Brother been missing?" Zuko's uniform came with a little notepad and a weird inkless writing stick, doubtless of earthbender make. He took them out. "He's not missing," said the assistant head, with a glance to the rooftops. "He's just not here. But we're not reporting that. Please don't write that down." Don't write that down. Zuko finished writing down. Why don't you want to report him missing? Here we are, Old Sweepy said, and let them in. Okay. Ryo took over, as the assistant head led them past costumes in glass cases and extravagant wall maps that wisely focused on their own nation. Topography only. If there weren't any borders drawn, then there couldn't possibly be a need to have borders redrawn. Though some charming students had vandalized the Gaipan area, replacing the dam reservoir with a darkly inked lake. Speaking of which, am I right in assuming that the professor's not missing? He's just taking a lakeside vacation. Boy, was this not how Ryo wanted to come back here. At least he'd never actually been in this building before. The assistant head managed to slump even as he walked. Exactly, he confirmed. No, he is not, said the missing professor's sister. Listen, he was out on a research project in the Siwong Desert. That is, really far out of our jurisdiction, pointed out Ro Choujio. And his itinerary should have had him back here 2 weeks ago. With how stingy project funding is, he doesn't have the money to not come back. And now this man, she said, stabbing a finger towards the assistant head, is telling me someone's been stealing his things right after he's gone missing. Doesn't that seem rat-fishy to you? If someone wanted to steal from him, they would have done it while he was scheduled to be gone, not started as soon as he was meant to be back. Someone knows something. Someone's hiding something. Someone in the city. Yeah, agreed the baby, face down on her shoulder, staring at Rocho's Yo with its half-lidded baby eyes. Its free hand made sleepy grabbing motions at his hat. Ryocho's Yo walked a little slower, putting yet another step between him and it. The assistant head was sweating. Probably not from the climb. A lot of people assumed talking to the guards was just a roundabout way of talking to the Dai Li. Ba Sing Se University and the anthropology department in particular do not endorse the view that Professor Zay's disappearance. Is he missing or at a lake? Asked the Fire Nation prince, identification pending. Scowling up from the notes he'd been making the whole time as they were climbing the stairs. What was he even writing? Was any sort of inside job from any party within the city? No inside parties here, Old Sweepy agreed. He was following them for some reason. No one got far in Ba Sing Se by questioning vaguely vacant-seeming people following them for inscrutable reasons. He's missing, the woman said, jabbing a finger at Lee's notepad. Write that down. Lee wrote, and kept asking questions, like, did he have enemies? And was his research valuable? Like he thought he was a real detective. Ryocho Zhou wasn't even a real detective. This is just like searching for the Avatar, except the witnesses were fresher. Zuko kept asking questions. The woman kept answering. This was deeply satisfying to them both. What's even missing? Can we ask him? What? Croaked the assistant head. Didn't you say he was just down at the lake? Zuko pressed. I don't think he'll remember. The assistant head replied, somewhat strangled. They finally reached the right floor and stepped out into yet another hall lined with displays. The anthropology department was huge and seemed to hold more culture than could possibly exist in the world. except that Zuko didn't see any sign of Fire Nation culture, or even anything modern. It was like someone had come in and decided that anthropology stopped 100 years ago. He frowned at his notes. How did the professor usually enter the city? The ferry, the woman replied. Has anyone checked the passenger lists to see if he even came back? No, they haven't, she said. And thank you. Sometimes I feel like anyone could make anyone disappear in this city, and the guards wouldn't even look twice. They wouldn't, Zuko confirmed, still writing. Ryo walked next to the assistant head, the both of them observing this train wreck in progress. You sure these break-ins aren't related to them? If it was the resort attendants, the assistant head carefully phrased, as old Sweepy swept his way up the last steps behind them. They could just come through the front door. We wouldn't stop them. No. No one would. Ryo only liked the conspiracies he could do something about.
See,
said the baby, wiggling awake in her mother's arms. They'd passed a line of sand sailor diagrams and stopped in front of a closed office door.
see, see.
Zizi was extremely close to Zuzu, and one baby girl sounded much like another. Zuko was starting to feel an emotion. I'm sorry, sweetie, her mother said. No, Zizi, and Mommy needs your key. Zizi turned to screaming. This was not an unfamiliar progression. What can you tell us about the break-ins? Ryo asked, over the sound of a screaming baby. How did you even know they were break-ins, if the door's been locked? We first noticed his pictures going missing, the assistant head said, motioning to an empty place on the wall right next to the door, where the line of weird flat-bottomed boat sketches ended with a distinct pride of place gap. I know, the woman said, bouncing her flailing child as she worked to open the door. Mama's the worst person ever. Then some of his books, on loan to another professor and his students. Then a grad student was working late one night and heard someone in his office, which is when we discovered the spare key was missing and contacted you. The woman got the door open and handed the key back. The baby finally stopped screaming. The worst. She soothed it, rubbing circles on its hiccuping back as they stepped inside. Are there any other ways in? Ryo asked, squinting into the dark space. He'd taken out his own notepad and pencil now that they were actually investigating. This had nothing to do with how Lee had been writing this whole time. The probable prince was glaring at the window shutters and still writing, even now, like there was something Ryo was missing. None, the assistant head confirmed, as Ryo's extremely temporary partner unlatched the shutters and stuck his head out. Zuko leaned out over 3 stories of window ledges and decorative stone carvings. From the opposite rooftop, 2 patches of shadow topped by conical hats paused their run to look at him leaning. Cultural authorities would hang out at universities. Latches aren't locks, Zuko said, straightening. Anyone could climb up. We're on the 3rd floor, the assistant head said. When did your key go missing? Asked the rookie, like the locked door was a better entry point than the windows. He was poised to write down the answer, like it was the first information that mattered,
Z,
the baby shouted.
Z, Z.
It was stretching its free hand out towards the desk. There was a sketched portrait there, showing clearly in the green light through the window, featuring an even smaller version of the baby. Holding her was a smiling man.
Z,
The baby insisted, and started looking all around. No, Z, baby. I'm sorry. What was he working on? The rookie was asking. Anything important? The assistant head answered. Something about a library. I don't know why anyone would want to hurt him, the woman said, her eyes on the portrait. Zuko didn't write that one down. My husband was... I know why they took him, but my brother never got into any of that. His lectures weren't political. His research was ancient. I had to remind him to check, before he left, that the war hadn't reached the desert yet. He'd forgotten. Without help. She laughed, like there was a joke there. Old Sweepy's just gonna show himself out, said Old Sweepy, for no apparent reason. He backed out of the office door, sweeping his way behind him. Please find him, the woman said. Please find him alive. I'm good at finding people, Zuko said, which wasn't a promise, but it was the truth. They were left alone to examine the office and set up whatever they were going to set up for this stakeout. Zuko wasn't clear on that, either. Air nomad artifacts and avatar relics didn't usually require much staking out.
Z,
The baby started wailing as her mother carried her out, and didn't stop. They could hear her all the way down the hall and on to the staircase.
Z, Z, Z.
Like she'd had it in her baby head that Z's office meant her Z would be there, and she couldn't understand why they were leaving before he came. So, what do we do? Zuko asked, as the screams got fainter. Find a place to wait, the rookie said. And so Zuko was left alone, with the guy Knife had been talking to about his proof of who Zuko was, or wasn't. Ryo started after the retreating Z's. There went the last people who'd seen Ryo alone with the Fire Nation. At least the professor's sister knew how to file a missing persons report. There are claw marks on this desk, the probable prince said, which really didn't make Ryo feel better. There were claw marks slightly scratched into the surface of the desk, and teeth marks dented into the cover of a book that had been dropped and left behind. There were gaps in the shelves where books should have been, papers scattered around the room, a little model sand sailor tipped over and fallen to the floor. It was kind of haphazard, like someone had been grabbing things one handful at a time. Maybe a magpie raccoon got in? The rookie said, like a magpie raccoon would have closed the shutters when it left, and latched them. They couldn't hear the baby anymore. They couldn't hear anyone. Even the cultural authorities were gone. There was a distant sound of sweeping, but it might have been the wind, or wishful thinking. Should I close the window again? Zuko asked, staring at their only light source, because neither of them had brought a lantern, and Zuko wasn't going to firebend in front of a guard. Probably, the guard said, with equal enthusiasm. The shutters creaked. So, at least they'd hear if someone came in that way. They ended up in the assistant head's office, which was just across the hall. They left the doors to both rooms just slightly ajar and took seats on either side of their own crack. The rookie seemed entirely uncomfortable with the position, or maybe with something else. "Listen, Lee," he said, as even the sounds of old Sweepy's broom faded, leaving them alone in a stone building where every little mouse cricket's noise echoed. "I heard what you said to the professor's sister, and, I don't think you understand. Sometimes people just disappear in this city." "I noticed." The probably a prince's eyes were gold, and Ryo wasn't sure if he was imagining that unnatural eye shine, and he definitely wasn't imagining the glare, like people disappearing was a thing Ryo had any personal say in. "It's not like what happened to you and the kids," he clarified, because, okay, maybe the guards at large did have something to do with certain disappearances. "It's..." "Shh," the prince said. Ryo shushed. Lee had his non-burned ear to the door. There were no footfalls in the hall. There was not the creaking of someone, magpie raccoon or not, pushing open window shutters. Ryo peeked out, and there wasn't any more light in the professor's office, and the door hadn't moved from the crack they'd left it at. There was someone in there, regardless. Thump came a sound. Thump, thump, slide. And then a wind gushed outwards, running cold, desiccating fingers up his arm that were nothing like the muddy staleness of a Bossing Say spring night. The new air smelled of something. Ryo couldn't place it, but there'd been a viper fox nest in the crawl space of his new apartment one winter, and the musk that crawled into his nose now was something a little like, and something totally different than, the smell-feel touch of holding the shed skins he'd found back there when spring had come and the nest had woken and gone before he'd ever known they were there. It was spring again, and there was something just on the other side of the wall again. But this time, he knew it was there, even if he didn't want to. Crumple, crumple, said some papers. Drag, said something else. Thud, crack, drag, drag. Ryo was not being paid enough for this. Junior Guardsman Lee, who was not being paid anything at all, leapt up and threw their door open, and the next one, and a fox kit was on the floor of the professor's office, dragging a framed portrait half its own size across the floor. Not a viper fox, or a swan fox, or a mole fox. Just a fox. "What?" said Ryo. "You!" said Lee, and lunged for it. The door to the 41st precinct opened, and a girl around Song's age walked in. She wore the same kind of clothes as everyone in the lower ring. Worn greens and browns, but as clean and neat and well-patched as anyone could make them, without the money to buy new. She had 2 black braids over her shoulders. She looked around for a moment, then spotted their desk, and smiled as she came over. It looked genuine, even. Not that Song thought herself a good judge of that anymore. "Hi, I'm Jin. I'm here to help you with your visa applications. Sorry I'm late. I wanted to bring tea, but the woman I nanny for didn't come home until late, and she tried to get me to stay even longer, but I was already scheduled to meet with you, and the best shop was already closed. The tea shop, I mean, and..." She slapped her cheeks. "Right, I'm here now. Let's get started." There was a soft red flush to her cheeks that might be from the walk over, or the little slaps, or the mortifying ordeal of talking too much in front of new people. But it hadn't really started until she'd mentioned the tea shop. There weren't many tea shops worth mentioning in the lower ring. Song and Taiji exchanged a look. A look, to be specific. "Tell us more about this tea shop," Taiji said. Song gave her sweetest smile. "We're new in town, after all. What makes this one the best?" The girl blushed harder. The fox kit yelped through its teeth, never letting go of the portrait as it dodged. Lee hit the floor with a crash. Ryocho's Yo kept standing there, staring, because the wall was opening. A wall that should have led to the empty hallway, because that was what was on the other side. Stood gaping, open, to a stairway. One that went down and down. One that breathed that shed skin smell, and the cold and the dry, and the bookshelf that had been in front of it was swinging back like a doorway, gaping impossibly open. "Catch it!" the probable prince ordered. Something small and furry was dodging over his foot just then, making for that impossible door. And Ryocho's Yo's brain was throwing up question mark after question mark. So, it was really easy to listen when someone barked an order like they knew what they were doing. He grabbed and caught a tail. The kit yelped around the frame, its front paws scrabbling at the first stair. "Slide," whispered the bookshelf as it started to swing closed. "Oh, no, you don't," said Lee, and tumbled into Ryo, who tumbled into the fox, who tumbled down the stairs. "Thump," said the bookcase, as it settled shut behind them. "Is this a boy thing?" Meilin asked, with a grave, prepubescent suspicion. The new girl covered her face with both hands, blushing harder.